Hey guys, tonight we are packing our bags, leaving behind everything we know, and heading back in time to the American West of the 1800 seconds. Now before you start picturing yourself as a cool, steely-eyed hero in a blockbuster movie, let's be very clear, this is not that story. This is a survival challenge, whereas today, you probably wouldn't last a day. Your greatest threats aren't dramatic duels at high noon, they're the silent, unglamorous killers, like a contaminated sip of water, a simple cut on your finger, or just the sheer, crushing boredom of it all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love seeing where you all are listening from. Drop a comment and let me know your city and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins, as it so often does, with a lie. A beautiful, tempting, golden lie. Right now, you're stuck. Maybe you're hunched over a desk in a stuffy Boston office, the air thick with the smell of coal smoke and damp wool. Or perhaps you're on a farm in Ohio, staring at the same muddy patch of land your father stared at, and his father before him. The days are a repetitive rhythm of hard work for little reward. The future feels like a long, straight road with no interesting turns. It's safe, it's predictable, and it's slowly grinding your spirit into dust. Then one day you see it. It might be a poster tacked to a wall, vibrant with color in a world of gray and brown. It could be a pamphlet someone left at the general store, or a letter from a cousin of a friend who supposedly struck it rich. The message is always the same. GOWESD. The poster shows a family smiling and healthy, standing before a quaint, sturdy cabin. The father, with his magnificent beard, leans proudly on an axe. The sun is always setting in a glorious blaze of orange and purple over endless fields of gold and wheat. The land it promises is practically free for the taking. The government is giving it away. It's a place of boundless opportunity, a blank slate where a person can reinvent themselves, breathe fresh, clean air, and become the master of their own destiny. The pamphlets are full of soaring rhetoric about manifest destiny, your divine right and duty to spread civilization from sea to shining sea. You hold this piece of paper in your hands, and it feels like holding the future. You read the words Garden of the World and you believe them. You've even read the articles that confidently declare rain follows the plow, a popular theory at the time suggesting that the very act of farming arid land would magically summon rain clouds and transform the desert into a lush paradise. It sounds scientific enough. It confirms what you want to be true. Of course, the poster conveniently omits a few details. It doesn't show the swarms of locusts that can devour that entire golden wheat field in a single afternoon. It doesn't depict the blizzards that can bury that quaint cabin in 15 feet of snow, trapping the smiling family inside. It fails to mention that the fresh, clean air often carries cholera, and the free land is already home to people who are not particularly interested in being civilized by newcomers. And it certainly doesn't show the graves. So many graves dug in a hurry, marked by a simple wooden cross or a pile of stones along the trail. But you don't see any of that. You see an escape. You see a solution. And here's something historians still chew on: what was the bigger push, the sheer, grinding poverty and rigidity of your current life, or the pull of that powerful, almost mythical idea of a second chance? Was it a desperate flight from failure, or a hopeful crusade for glory? The truth is probably a messy, complicated mix of both, unique to every single person who looked at that poster in the face of that proud, bearded man. That night, you lie in your lumpy bed, but you don't sleep. The familiar sounds of your life, the creak of the floorboards, the distant clatter of a horse on cobblestone, are already starting to fade. Your mind is thousands of miles away, galloping across vast, open plains under a sky studded with more stars than you've ever seen. You're no longer a clerk or a farmer. You are a pioneer, an adventurer. You are the hero of your own story, and the first chapter is about to begin. And you have bought it completely. The decision has been made. The lie has been consumed. Now comes the messy, unglamorous part: dismantling your entire life and trying to cram it into a wooden box on wheels. The first step is a great, sweeping act of subtraction. You sell your land if you have any. You sell your tools, your furniture, the very bed you slept in last night while dreaming of glory. Each item sold is a tie to your old life being slipped away, a small, echoing finality. Their face is a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They think you're either incredibly brave or a colossal fool. There is no in between. With a pocket full of cash less than you'd hoped for, always less you head to the outfitters. This is where the dream starts to get expensive. The men who run these stores, especially in the jumping-off towns, have a special kind of smile. It's the smile of someone who knows you need them far more than they need you. They hand you a list. It's a daunting, brutally practical document. For each adult, they recommend at least 200 pounds of flour, 150 pounds of bacon, 20 pounds of coffee, 40 pounds of sugar, plus salt, lard, dried fruit, and beans. The sheer volume is staggering. You're not packing for a trip, you're provisioning a mobile fortress against starvation. Then come the tools. An axe is non-negotiable. A shovel for digging everything from fire pits to latrines to, well, other things you don't want to think about. Rope, tar buckets, a heavy cast iron skillet, and of course a weapon. You probably buy a rifle, feeling a surge of that heroic frontiersman persona as you hold it. It feels solid and powerful. You imagine yourself fending off dangers with it, providing for your family. You probably don't spend enough time thinking about cleaning it, or how much the ammunition costs, or the simple, awful math of how hard it is to hit a moving target when your hands are shaking from exhaustion and hunger. Now, with your wagon already half full of flour sacks and practical ironware, you are introduced to the wonders of 19th century marketing. The outfitter, seeing the look of a nervous novice in your eyes, starts showing you the specialty items. These are the gadgets and patent-protected miracle cures designed to prey on the fears you didn't even know you had. He'll talk in hushed tones about the prairie miasma, a mysterious vapor said to rise from the ground and cause fevers. But don't worry, he has just the thing, a small bottle of Drive, Abernathy's aromatic tincture, guaranteed to ward it off. It smells suspiciously like cinnamon-flavored whiskey. And then he unveils the masterpiece. He sees you eyeing the ground, probably imagining the slithering horrors that await. Concerned about rattlers, he asks, already knowing the answer. He pulls out a thick, coarse wool blanket, he says with reverence, woven with a patented blend of horsehide and a secret herbal compound from the Orient. No snake will cross it, guaranteed. You feel the blanket. It smells faintly of mothballs and something vaguely minty. It's expensive. But the thought of waking up with a rattlesnake in your bedroll is a powerful motivator. You buy the snake-proof blanket. It will, of course, do absolutely nothing to deter a snake. But for now, it's a small, pricey piece of peace of mind. This brings you to the truly heartbreaking part of the process. With the practical necessities and the useless junk all purchased, you look at the sliver of space you have left. Everything you love that can't be eaten or used to fix a broken wheel has to fit in one small trunk. Historians and archaeologists who have studied the trail still ponder the choices people made right at this moment. What do you take? Do you pack the family Bible? Its pages filled with the names and dates of your ancestors. Or do you take an extra sack of beans? Do you bring your mother's porcelain teapot, a fragile link to a more civilized life? Or do you pack more lead shot for the rifle? What people chose to bring, and what they were forced to leave behind, is a source of endless academic fascination. It speaks volumes about their hopes and fears. Some packed for the life they were leaving, bringing delicate heirlooms that would be shattered on the trail within weeks. Others packed for a brutal, imagined war against nature, loading up on weapons and tools, only to find the greatest enemy was the crushing loneliness and monotony. You are forced to make this choice now. The rocking chair your father made, it's too big. Your small collection of books too heavy. You pack a few tin-type photographs, a change of clothes, and maybe one small, treasured object that will serve as a reminder of who you were before you became this person who owns a snake-proof blanket. You stand back and look at the fully loaded wagon. It's a testament to hope, fear, and terrible compromises. It's your entire world now, and it's already groaning under the weight of your expectations. With your life reduced to a precarious pile of possessions in a wooden wagon, you finally move. You join a river of humanity flowing west, a slow, creaking procession of other families who also fell for the golden lie. Your destination, for now, is one of the jumping-off points, the last bastion of what passes for civilization before you plunge into the unknown. It might be Independence, Street, Joseph, or Council Bluffs. In your mind, these are heroic-sounding names, gateways to adventure. The reality is far grubbier. Let's say you arrive in Independence, Missouri. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's a thick, soupy combination of mud, animal manure, unwashed bodies, whiskey, and smoke. The town is bursting at the seams. It's a chaotic, swirling mass of people and animals. Streets, if you can call them that, are rivers of mud, sometimes knee-deep, sucking at the boots of grim-faced men and the hems of weary women's dresses. The noise is a constant, grating symphony, the braying of stubborn mules, the lowing of cattle, the sharp crack of a whip, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the ceaseless shouting of a dozen different languages and accents. This is the staging ground for the American dream, and it looks more like a refugee camp after a flood. Tents and makeshift shelters spill out from the town proper, creating a sprawling, disorganized suburb of desperation. You see other families, just like yours, their faces a mask of anxiety. You see hardened traders, their eyes missing nothing, sizing you up, calculating the value of your livestock. You see groups of young men, full of bravado and cheap liquor, spoiling for a fight. You see con men, preachers and gamblers all circling the hopeful like sharks. Your plan is to rest here, make final preparations, and join a wagon train. But the town has other plans for you. It's a place designed to fleece you of your last few dollars before you even hit the trail. Everything is wildly overpriced. A new wheel for your wagon triple the price it was back home. A bag of feed for your oxen extortionate. The savvy business owners here know you have no other choice. But the biggest danger in Independence isn't the price gouging or the casual violence simmering just below the surface. The greatest threat is invisible. It's in the water. You are thirsty from your journey. You dip a cup into a communal well or a nearby creek. The water looks clear enough, but what you don't see is that just upstream, another wagon train has made camp. Their animals are relieving themselves in the water. People are washing their clothes, and their cooking pots in it. The camp's latrine trench is dug too close to the water source, and last night's rain has caused it to overflow. The water is a teeming, microscopic soup of human and animal waste. And in that soup lurks debris or cholera. They call it the Blue Terror or the Asiatic Scourge. It's the unofficial and terrifyingly efficient, welcoming committee for the Oregon Trail. Within a day or two of your arrival, you might start to feel a little off, a rumbling in your stomach. Then come the cramps, violent and debilitating. The disease is astonishingly aggressive. It forces your body to expel every last drop of fluid in a torrent of watery diarrhea, famously described as rice water stool. You become horrifically dehydrated with terrifying speed. Your eyes sink back into your skull. Your voice becomes a hoarse whisper. You are perfectly lucid, but trapped inside a body that is shutting down. There is no cure. The local doctor might bleed you, which only weakens you further. He might give you a dose of laudanum or calomel, a toxic mercury compound, which only poisons you. The only thing that could save you is rehydration, but nobody understands that yet. People watch in horror as their strong, healthy loved ones are reduced to withered, blue-tinged corpses in less than 24 hours. This is where the dream collides with a brutal, biological reality. Historians are still debating the exact mortality rates, but it's estimated that in peak years, cholera epidemics could wipe out up to 10% of the immigrants before they even properly started their journey. The trail of 1849 was particularly devastating. It was a lottery of death, and your ticket was drawn the moment you drank that water. You see the hasty burials on the edge of town, the fresh mounds of dirt, a constant, grim reminder. You hear the whispers. The Miller family, who arrived just last week, lost their father and youngest son. A group of single men from Germany, all gone. The fear is palpable. It hangs in the air, even thicker than the smell. You stop drinking from the well. You stop drinking from the well. You stop drinking from the well. You start boiling all your water, a tedious and time-consuming chore, but one that might just save your life. You came here seeking the frontier, and instead you found a biological war zone. The heroic adventure hasn't even begun, and already you're just trying to survive the welcome party. The chaos of independence is behind you, but now you have to get intimately acquainted with your new home, your primary mode of transport, and what will likely feel like your own personal wooden prison for the next 6 months. This is the prairie schooner, the Conestoga wagon, and it is absolutely nothing like the spacious, comfortable vehicle you might have imagined. First, let's talk about the name, prairie schooner. It's a romantic, evocative term, coined because the white canvas tops from a distance look like the sails of ships gliding over a sea of grass. It's a lovely bit of poetry. The reality is far less graceful. This is not a chic vessel, it's a brutish, utilitarian box. It's essentially a farm cart. Slightly oversized, with a hoops and canvas cover slapped on top. You walk up to your wagon, the one you probably bought for an inflated price back in town. It's about 10 to 12 feet long and 4 feet wide. Stand inside. Now imagine cramming in over a ton of supplies, sacks of flour, barrels of water, heavy tools, crates of bacon, your one trunk of personal belongings. There is no room left. The idea of your family happily riding inside, playing cards and singing songs as the scenery rolls by, is a complete fantasy. You walk. Almost everyone walks. The wagon is too heavy, the terrain too rough, and the animals pulling it, oxen, usually are too precious to tire out by hauling human passengers. Women and children old enough to keep up will walk alongside the wagon, day in and day out, for up to 2,000 miles. The only people who get to ride are the very sick, the very young, or someone who has just given birth. Riding in the wagon is not a luxury, it's a sign that something is terribly wrong, and even if you did get to ride, you wouldn't want to. There's no suspension. None. You feel every single bump, every rock. The wheels are massive wooden things rimmed with iron. The ride is a violent, jarring, bone-shaking ordeal. It's an effective way to churn butter, and just as effective at churning your insides. People who were sick and forced to ride often described the experience as pure torture. Your life now revolves around the tedious, constant maintenance of this wooden beast. Every morning you have to grease the axles. You use a mixture of tar, tallow, and whatever other sludge you can get your hands on. It's a foul, sticky job. You have to scoop the gunk into the hub of each wheel to keep it from seizing up. If you forget or do a poor job, the friction could literally set your axle on fire, leaving you stranded in the middle of nowhere. The canvas cover, your only protection from the elements, is a constant source of anxiety. It's heavy cotton duck, probably treated with linseed oil to make it water-resistant. It's not waterproof. In a real downpour, it will leak. In the relentless sun, it turns the inside of the wagon into a suffocating oven. In the wind, it snaps and cracks like a whip, and a strong gust can rip it right off the wooden hoops, exposing all your precious supplies to the rain. Then there's the sheer physics of the thing. It's top-heavy and has a high center of gravity. Going up a steep hill requires doubling up teams of oxen and pushing from behind. Going down a steep hill is even more terrifying. You have to chain the wheels to stop them from turning, essentially turning the wagon into a giant sled, and pray that it doesn't slide out of control and tumble into a ravine. Tipping over is a constant, terrifying possibility. Here's a little detail they don't show you in the movies: the language. You will learn to swear. You might have been a pious, church-going person your whole life, but after a week of dealing with stubborn oxen and a wagon stuck in the mud, you will develop a rich and colorful vocabulary you never knew you had. The air around the wagon reins was famously blue with curses. These men work old bull W hackers for a reason, and their primary tools of communication were a whip and a stream of shockingly creative profanity. Historians still debate whether the oxen actually understood any of it, but it certainly seemed to make the drivers feel better. You stare at this clumsy, awkward, demanding vehicle. This is your ark. It holds everything you need to start a new life. But it's also a fragile, unreliable coffin on wheels, pulled by dumb animals across a landscape that is actively trying to break it. You'll learn its every groan, its every groan, its every croak. You'll develop a love-hate relationship with it, mostly hate. It is your greatest asset and your heaviest burden, a rolling symbol of the monumental, back-breaking task you have set for yourself. You've been on the trail for a few weeks now. The initial shock of the journey is wearing off, replaced by a monotonous, grinding rhythm. But just as you're starting to think you can handle this, a new enemy makes its presence felt. It's not a dramatic foe like a rattlesnake or a flash flood. It's quiet, insidious, and utterly humiliating. They call it the summer complaint, the prairie plague, or, more bluntly, the bloody flux. We're talking about dysentery. It starts as so many trail maladies do, with contaminated water or food. You're being more careful now, maybe boiling your water most of the time. But are you boiling it long enough? Is the pot you're cooking in truly clean, the bacon you've been eating for weeks on end? Is it starting to go rancid in the heat you're preparing food in dusty, windy conditions, with flies buzzing everywhere? Sanitation is a concept that doesn't exist out here. Your latrine is a shallow trench dug a reasonable distance from camp. How reasonable is it really? The first sign is a familiar, unpleasant cramping in your gut. But this isn't like the cholera you feared back in Independence. This is a slower, more degrading affair. The diarrhea begins, and it's frequent and urgent. You find yourself constantly having to leave the train, hurrying to find a bit of privacy behind a sparse bush or in a shallow gully. There is no privacy. The entire wagon train, a rolling community of 100+ people, is acutely aware of your predicament. Then it gets worse. The cramps intensify, becoming sharp, stabbing pains. You start to see blood. This is the calling card of dysentery, caused by bacterial or amoebas like entamoeba histolytical. It's an infection that causes severe inflammation of your intestines. You develop a fever. You feel weak, shaky, and utterly miserable. Every jarring bump of the wagon, which you are now likely riding in, sends a fresh wave of agony through your abdomen. There's no medicine for this. Your trail guide might have a folk remedy, probably involving some boiled bark or a noxious-tasting herbal tea. It won't work. The doctor in your party, if you're unlucky enough to have one, might give you a dose of calomel. This was a very popular 19th century cure-all, a chalky powder containing mercury chloride. The prevailing medical theory, known as heroic medicine, believed in purging the body of illness. Calomel was a very effective purgative, meaning it would cause violent, explosive diarrhea and vomiting. So their treatment for your severe, bloody diarrhea was to induce even more severe, violent diarrhea. Historians of medicine look back on this with a kind of horrified awe. The cure was, quite literally, a poison that mimicked and amplified the symptoms of the disease. One of the most bizarre and grim little facts about trail life is the roadside telegraph. The trail was so heavily used that immigrants would leave messages for those behind them. They'd write them on bleached animal skulls, slabs of rock, or pieces of discarded wood. Good water ahead, one might say. Or, watch for hostile natives near the Platte. But a distressingly common message was a simple, stark warning: bad water, cholera, or beware the bloody flux. Gyro Mile route was littered with these grim PS as a macabre message board powered by suffering. You are now profoundly weak. Dehydration is a major concern. The irony is that you're surrounded by water in the rivers and streams, but you're terrified to drink it. You're losing your appetite. The very thought of more greasy bacon and hardtack makes your stomach turn. You are wasting away, day by day, in the back of a stinking, lurching wagon. The social aspect is just as painful. There is no dignity in this illness. The smell clings to you, to your blankets, to the very air in the wagon. Your family members do their best to care for you, their faces edged with worry and a kind of weary revulsion. It's a disease that strips you of your humanity before it takes your life. Whether you survive dysentery is a coin toss. It depends on the strength of your immune system, the severity of the infection, and pure dumb luck. Many didn't make it. They would simply weaken and fade over a period of weeks, dying a slow, painful, and deeply unheroic death. Their graves would join the countless others that lined the trail, their passing marked perhaps by a short, tired prayer. This is the reality of the journey. The great epic of westward expansion was, for many, a story that ended in a shallow grave, dug because someone drank from the wrong stream on the wrong day. It's a brutal, simple truth that the grand narrative of history often forgets. If the diseases don't get you, the sheer, soul-crushing routine might. The heroic image you had of yourself as a pioneer, gazing thoughtfully at the horizon, is quickly replaced by the reality of being a glorified beast of burden. Your life is no longer measured in days or weeks, but in miles, 15 miles. That is the goal every single day. It sounds simple. It is anything but. Your day begins before the sun even thinks about rising. At around for a sentry fires a rifle shot, or a trumpeter blows a harsh, unwelcome blast. That is your alarm clock. You crawl out of your damp bedroll, the air cold and sharp. The first moments of consciousness are a groggy, shivering misery. There is no gentle waking up. There is only the immediate, pressing waking up. The first task is rounding up the animals. Your oxen or mules, which were left to graze overnight, have probably wandered off. You and the other men stumble through the wet, pre-dawn gloom, searching for your team. The oxen are placid but profoundly stubborn creatures. Coaxing them back to camp is your first test of patience for the day, and you usually fail it. While the men are wrangling the livestock, the women are already at the fire. They have to rekindle the embers from last night, or start a new fire with damp kindling and buffalo chips dried dung, the main fuel source on the treeless plains. The smell is distinctive. They start preparing breakfast. What's for breakfast? The same thing you had yesterday, and the same thing you will have tomorrow: coffee, bacon, and some form of bread, probably a dense, greasy biscuit cooked in a cast iron pan. You have to choke it down quickly, standing up. By 7 a.m. the train is ready to move. This is the process of yoking up, a symphony of chaos, shouting, and curses. The oxen need to be guided into position, the heavy wooden yokes lowered onto their necks, and the whole apparatus chained to the wagon. It's heavy, dangerous work. A spooked ox can crush your foot in an instant. And then, you walk. For the next 4 to 5 hours you walk. You walk beside the lumbering wagon, your hand often resting on its side. The sun begins to climb, beating down on you. The dust, kicked up by hundreds of hooves and dozens of wagons, is a constant presence. It gets in your eyes, your mouth. It coats your clothes and skin with a fine layer of grime. The pace is slow, agonizingly slow, about 2 miles per hour. It's the pace of a funeral procession. You don't talk much. You're either tired. The only sounds are the creaking of the wagons, the lowing of the cack of a whip, and the endless, shuffling tramp of feet. The landscape is vast, empty, and unchanging. You see the same featureless plains for days on end. It's a sensory deprivation tank on a continental scale. Around noon, you stop for a noon. A 1-hour break. There's no time for a big meal. You might chew on some cold, leftover bacon and a piece of hardtack, a flour and water biscuit so tough it was nicknamed sheet iron. You check the animal's hooves for stones. You tighten the ropes on your wagon's load. And then, just as you've managed to catch your breath, the trumpet sounds again. The afternoon is a repeat of the morning, only hotter and more miserable. This is often the hardest part of the day. The fatigue sets in deep in your bones. Every step is an effort. Your mind goes numb. You exist in a trance of exhaustion and boredom. Finally, as the sun begins to dip towards the horizon, the wagon master signals to form the nightly circle. The wagons are maneuvered into a defensive corral, not just for protection against potential raids, but more practically, to form a pen for the livestock. The work is not over. The animals must be unyoked and tended to. The women must start preparing the evening meal. What's for dinner? Bacon, beans, and coffee. After dinner there might be a brief window of socializing. People gather around the campfires, mending clothes, or just staring into the flames. Sometimes someone might pull out a fiddle, and a few weary souls might even manage a clumsy dance. but mostly people are too exhausted. By 9 p.m., the camp is silent. You crawl into your bedroll, your body aching in places you didn't know could ache. You fall into a heavy, dreamless sleep, knowing that in just a few short hours, the trumpet will blast again, and you will have to do it all over again. 15 miles. One of the ongoing debates among historians is just how grueling this was for the different members of the family. While men's labor was heavy and physically demanding, ranked in annals fixing wagons, women's work was utterly relentless. It started before the men's and ended after, with no nooning break. They cooked, cleaned, cared for the sick, and often did so while pregnant or tending to multiple small children. The phrase "a woman's work is never done" was forged in the crucible of places like this. You are not conquering the West. You are being consumed by it, one 15-mile day at a time. The monotonous, dusty plains had become your life, but now you see a shimmering line on the horizon. It's a river. The Platte, the Kansas, the Snake, the names are legendary, but the reality is a formidable obstacle. In your mind, a river crossing might involve a sturdy bridge or a reliable ferry. That is not the case here. Crossing a river on the Oregon Trail is one of the most dangerous, chaotic, and financially ruinous things you will do. Your wagon rain pulls up to the bank of the river. It's wide, muddy, and the current looks deceptively slow. The wagon master, a man who has done this before, has a grim look on his face. He explains the options, none of which are good. Option 1: find a shallow spot and ford it. This sounds easy. It is not. The riverbed is not a smooth, sandy bottom. It's a treacherous landscape of hidden rocks, soft mud, and sudden drop-offs. You and the other men will wade into the frigid water, trying to find a viable path. The water might only be waist deep, but the current is strong enough to knock you off your feet. Once a path is chosen, the crossing begins. You have to prepare the wagon. The inside is a mess of frantic activity. You try to raise all your precious supplies, the flour, the sugar, the gunpowder, onto makeshift platforms, stacking them on top of crates to keep them out of the water that will inevitably slosh into the wagon bed. This is a cold, hard fact of trail life. Many pioneers arrived in Oregon with their entire supply of sugar melted into a sticky brown syrup at the bottom of the barrel, and their flour a solid, moldy cake. Then you drive your team of oxen into the water. The animals are terrified. They can feel the pull of the torrent and the unstable ground beneath their hooves. They resist, they pull back, they panic. The air is filled with the desperate bellows of the animals and the frantic, profanity-laced screams of the bull W hackers trying to force them forward. Your wagon lurches into the river. The wheels sink into the river. You are pushing from behind, shoulder deep in the murky water, screaming at the oxen, while the driver cracks his whip. Sometimes a wagon gets stuck. The wheels are hopelessly mired in the soft riverbed. The current pushes against its side, threatening to tip it over. Panic sets in. You have to double up teams, chaining other oxen to the front, hoping their combined strength can pull it free before the river claims it. If it tips, you lose everything. You lose everything. Not just your supplies, but your tools, your one trunk of personal possessions. You watch your life wash away downstream. Option to caulk the wagon bed and float it. This involves using tar and drags to seal the seams of your wagon box, essentially turning it into a makeshift and very clumsy boat. You then detach the wheels and float the body across, with men swimming alongside to guide it. This is incredibly risky. Your wagon was not designed to be a boat. It's unstable, prone to leaks, and can easily capsize. This brings us to one of the most heartbreaking aspects of river crossings: the loss of life. Drowning was one of the leading causes of death on the trail, far more common than the things we see in movies. It wasn't just men who drowned. Women and children, often waiting on the bank, could be swept away if the river suddenly rose. Or if they were riding in the wagon due to illness, they were wrapped if it overturned. The rivers were cold, and hypothermia was a constant threat. Historians and archaeologists occasionally find the remnants of these failed crossings. Wagon parts, iron tools, and sometimes, hauntingly, a child's toy, buried in the silt of a riverbed. These artifacts are a quiet testament to the terror of these moments. And here's a quirky, if dark, bit of trail, though some Native American tribes who lived near these treacherous crossings developed a rather profitable salvage business. They would wait for a wagon train to cross, and after the inevitable disaster, they would skillfully retrieve the goods that had been washed downstream and then sell them back to the immigrants, or to the next train that came along. Some historians argue about the extent and nature of this business, whether it was opportunistic salvage or something more predatory. You finally get your wagon to the other side. You are soaked to the bone, shivering, and completely exhausted. Your supplies are waterlogged. One of your oxen is limping badly. Downstream, the Johnson family is screaming because their wagon, containing all their worldly possessions, has just overturned and is now being carried away by the current. You watch it go a-bobbing, white canvas head to him for their dream. You made it across, but you've paid a price in energy, in supplies, and in a fresh, keen understanding of your own vulnerability. The river doesn't care about your dreams of a new life. It is a powerful, indifferent force of nature, and it has just reminded you, in no uncertain terms, who is really in charge out here. You've survived the river crossing, but one of your wagon mates wasn't so lucky. A young man trying to guide a panicked mule slipped and was crushed between a wagon wheel and a submerged boulder. He didn't die instantly. His leg is horribly broken, the bone jutting out at an unnatural angle. The whole camp falls silent. Everyone knows what this means. It's time to call for the doctor. The man who steps forward is not the reassuring figure of medical authority you might hope for. He might be an actual doctor, but HES more likely just a man who claims to be one. He could be a veterinarian, a dentist, or simply a fellow pioneer who happens to own a medical textbook and a saw. His name might be Dr. Nassau. His name might be Drive Miller, but back home, he was just Miller the barber. Barbers often considered qualification enough. The young man is laid out on a dirty blanket on the ground. HES pale with shock and pain. The doctor opens his medical bag. It's a worn leather case containing a terrifying assortment of tools, gleaming knives of various sizes, a large pair of forceps, some intimidating-looking hooks, and the centerpiece of his collection, a bone saw. It looks remarkably like something you'd use to prune a tree. There is no anesthesia, not out here. Anesthesia existed in the mid-19th century, with ether and chloroform being used in sophisticated city hospitals. But on the trail, you have two options for pain management. The first is a large bottle of whiskey. The doctor takes a swig himself, to steady his hands, and then pours a generous amount down the patient's throat. The second option is biting the bullet, which is exactly what it sounds like. Someone shoves a lead bullet between the patient's teeth for him to bite down on to stifle his screams. The doctor examines the leg. He pokes at the wound with an unwashed finger. He shakes his head grimly. The bone is shattered, he declares. There's no way to set it. It'll have to come off. Gangrene will set in otherwise, he says with an air of absolute authority. He is probably right about that. In a world without antibiotics, any complex fracture like this, with the bone exposed to the dirt and grime, was a death sentence from infection. Amputation was the only viable, albeit brutal, option. For large men are called over. Their job is to hold the patient down, one for each limb. The young man's eyes are wide with terror. The doctor rolls up his sleeves, picks up his knife, and without any further ceremony, he begins to cut. The screams are unlike anything you have ever heard. They are primal, animalistic sounds of pure agony. The men holding him down strain, their knuckles white, as the patient thrashes against them. The doctor works quickly, slicing through skin, muscle, then sinew. Then he picks up the saw. The sound is wet, grating, and rhythmic. It's a sound that will haunt your nightmares for the rest of your life. In less than a minute, it's over. But the ordeal isn't finished. The doctor now has to stop the bleeding. His method is cauterization. He takes a piece of metal, maybe the flat of his knife, maybe a specially shaped tool, and shoves it into the campfire until it glows red hot. Then he presses the searing metal against the open stump. The smell of burning flesh fills the air, and the patient, mercifully, faints from the pain. The stump is then wrapped in unsterilized rags, and the patient is given more whiskey. His chances of survival are slim. Historians who study 19th century medicine call this period the Dark Ages of surgery. While a surgeon's speed could be impressive, their complete and utter ignorance of germ theory was lethal. The doctor's hands were dirty. The rags were dirty. The most likely outcome now is a massive infection. The patient might wake up, but a fever will soon set in, and he will likely die in a few days from sepsis. It's a point of fierce debate among medical historians: was this kind of brutal surgery better than nothing, or did the unhygienic procedure actually hasten death? Some argue that in cases of severe trauma, it was the only chance, however small. Others contend that the shock and subsequent infection from the surgery itself were often more deadly than the original injury might have been if just left alone. You walk away from the scene, your stomach churning. You look at your own hands, calloused and dirty from the trail. A simple cut, a blister, a splinter, anything that breaks the skin is a potential death warrant. You suddenly feel incredibly fragile, your body a delicate machine surrounded by a world of filth and brutal incompetence. The West, you realize, doesn't just kill you with grand gestures like blizzards on raids. It can kill you with a tiny, invisible scratch and a man with a saw who thinks a cheese helping. The trauma of the field amputation fades into the background, replaced by a more chronic, nagging misery. You are hungry, not starving, not yet, but hungry in a way that gnaws at you from the inside out. You're eating every day, but you're still wasting away. Your clothes hang a little looser. You feel a constant, low-grade fatigue that has nothing to do with the miles you've walked. The problem isn't the quantity of food, it's the quality, or rather, the complete lack of it. Your diet has been reduced to a mind-numbing, nutritionally bankrupt Trinity bacon, beans, and bread. Every single day. For breakfast you have bacon. For the midday meal you have cold bacon. For dinner you have bacon. Again. Probably fried up with some beans. The bread is either hardtack, which could be used to patch a hole in the wagon, or a heavy, dense soda bread cooked in a Dutch oven, often full of ash from the fire. The bacon isn't the crisp, delicious kind you might be thinking of. This is salt-cured pork packed in giant crates. As the journey wears on, it goes rancid in the heat. The fat turns a sickly yellow and the smell becomes pungent. You have to trim off the worst parts and cook it until it's burnt to a crisp to make it edible. The flour you use for your bread is often infested with weevils, little black bugs that you have to sift out. The pioneers had a grimly cheerful saying: the trail is a great sifter of character and weevils. You dream of food. You fantasize about a fresh apple, a glass of milk, a leafy green vegetable. But out here, on the Great Plains, there is no fresh produce. There is no orchards. Your only source of fresh food is whatever you can hunt. The men go out in search of buffalo, antelope, or prairie chickens. A successful hunt is a cause for celebration. The whole camp feasts on fresh meat. A welcome relief from the monotony of salt pork. But hunting is unreliable, but also constantly on the move. You could go for weeks without seeing any game at all. This bland, repetitive, and vitamin-deficient diet starts to take a visible toll on your body. You notice your gums are starting to feel tender and swollen. They bleed when you chew on your hardtack. You might lose a tooth. Small bruises appear on your skin for no reason. Old scars start to ache and reopen. You feel listless, irritable, and deeply depressed. You have scurvy. You probably associate scurvy with old-time sailors on long sea voyages, but it was just as rampant on the prairie seas. It's a simple, brutal disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. Your body needs vitamin C to produce collagen, the glue that holds your cells together. Without it, your body literally starts to fall apart from the inside out. Your blood vessels become fragile, your connective tissues dissolve. Left untreated, it leads to internal hemorrhaging and death. The pioneers didn't understand vitamins, but they knew from experience that something in their diet was off. This is where a weird bit of folk medicine comes in. Some people believe that burying a scurvy patient in the earth up to their neck could draw out the disease. It was, of course, completely useless and probably terrifying for the patient. A slightly more effective, if still strange, remedy was drinking the blood of a freshly killed buffalo, believing its vitality could be transferred. The real cure was simple, but hard to come by. Find anything with vitamin C. Wild onions, prairie turnips, or the tart, bitter berries of the buffalo currant could halt the disease in its tracks. The pioneers would learn to watch for these plants, and their discovery could be as exciting as finding a vein of gold. Some historical accounts mention pioneers getting so desperate they would brew tea from tree bark or chew on prairie grass, hoping to find some relief. Historians still debate the true prevalence and impact of nutritional deficiencies on the trail. While dramatic deaths from things like cholera and accidents are well documented, the slow, grinding toll of malnutrition is harder to quantify. How many people were simply too weak from scurvy or general malnourishment to fight off a bout of dysentery? How many accidents happened because someone was dizzy and weak from hunger? It was a silent killer. A background condition that made every other danger on the trail that much more lethal. You chew your rancid bacon and try not to think about it. You feel your teeth with your tongue, praying they feel solid. You are walking through what was promised as the garden of the world, a land of boundless agricultural potential, and yet you are slowly, inexorably, being starved by it. The irony is as bitter as the bile in your throat. Your body is being assaulted from the inside by a terrible diet, and from the outside by an enemy that is vast, impersonal, and utterly merciless. The sky, the weather on the Great Plains is not just a backdrop to your journey, it's an active and malevolent character in your story. It wants to kill you, and it has a stunningly creative variety of ways to do it. You wake up one morning to a sky so blue and clear it hurts your eyes. The air is calm and warm. It feels like a perfect day. You start your slow 2-mile-per-hour trudge. Within an hour, you see a smudge on the horizon. The smudge grows, darkening from a soft gray to a bruised, angry purple with astonishing speed. The temperature plummets. The air becomes heavy and still. A strange, greenish light bathes the landscape. The oxen get skittish. Their eyes roll in fear. The veteran members of your wagon train start shouting orders. Circle the wagons, now. Then it hits. A ferocious hailstorm. This isn't the piece-sized ice you might be used to. These are chunks of ice the size of your fist, some as big as apples. They fall with such violence that they sound like a sustained barrage of gunfire. The noise is deafening. The ice shreds your wagons can discover to ribbons in minutes. It pummels the terrified animals, leaving them bruised and bleeding. You huddle under the wagon, a flimsy and inadequate shelter, as the world is battered around you. A direct hit on the head could easily kill you. The storm passes as quickly as it came, leaving behind a scene of devastation, ruined supplies, injured livestock, and a landscape covered in a bizarre, shimmering layer of ice under the hot summer sun. Or perhaps it's the heat. For weeks on end, the sun is a relentless, white-hot disk in a featureless sky. There is no shade. None. The temperature soars well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit sensible. The heat radiates back up from the baked earth, creating a shimmering, disorienting haze. Your water barrels are dangerously low, and the water inside is warm and tastes of stale wood. The iron on the wagon becomes too hot to touch. Your skin burns. Your lips crack and bleed. You see people collapse, their bodies no longer able to cope. They become dizzy, confused, their skin hot and dry. If they can't be cooled down quickly, they will die. And then there's the wind. A constant, nagging, ceaseless wind that blows for days on end. It gets into your head, fraying your nerves. It makes conversation impossible. It blows out your campfire. It picks up the fine prairie dust and blasts you with it. A low grades and blasting that scours your skin and fills your eyes, nose, and lungs. But the most terrifying weather event is the one you would least expect in the middle of summer, a blizzard. The weather on the plains is so volatile that a beautiful summer day can, with little warning, turn into a howling, Arctic nightmare. A blue norther can sweep down from the mountains, causing the temperature to drop 50 or 60 degrees in a matter of hours. If you're caught out in the open, you are in mortal danger. Rain turns to sleet, then to snow, driven sideways by a ferocious wind. Visibility drops to zero. You can't see the wagon in front of you. The world is reduced to a swirling white chaos. This is where you can die from exposure just a few feet from safety. People would wander away from the wagon to relieve themselves or check on an animal and become completely disoriented. Unable to find their way back, they would stumble blindly through the blizzard until they collapsed from exhaustion and hypothermia. Their bodies found frozen solid days later when the storm finally broke. One of the oddest, and most debated, phenomena reported by pioneers was something called prairie fires caused by lightning. Not just a simple fire, but massive sheets of flame that would supposedly race across the grasslands. Historians are still sifting through the more exaggerated accounts, trying to separate folklore from fact. But the threat of a fast-moving grass fire, ignited by a dry lightning strike in the middle of a thunderstorm, was very real. It could move faster than a running horse, a terrifying wall of fire consuming everything in its path. You learn to read the sky with a paranoid intensity. You watch the clouds, smell the air, and listen to the silence. You develop a grudging respect for the sheer, bipolar violence of the mid-continental climate. You thought your enemies would be bandits or wild animals. You were wrong. Your greatest enemy is the beautiful, terrible, and utterly indifferent sky above you. It doesn't care if you live or die. It just is, and today, it has decided to hail. The journey has become a blur of hardship, a monotonous cycle of walking, choking down bad food, and scanning the horizon for the next threat. The initial group of hopeful pioneers has been weathered down, their faces etched with a permanent, weary tension. And then the inevitable happens. Someone dies. It might be the young man whose leg was amputated a few weeks ago. The infection, as predicted, consumed him. It could be a child who succumbed to dysentery, her small body unable to fight any longer. It might be an older woman whose heart simply gave out from the sheer, relentless strain of the journey. The death is not a dramatic event. It's a quiet fading. A person who was a part of your rolling community yesterday is simply gone today. The wagon train halts. A profound, heavy silence falls over the camp. The usual sounds of creaking wagons and lowing cattle are conspicuously absent. The mood is somber, but also deeply pragmatic. There is no time for elaborate mourning. The trail waits for no one. A burial needs to be arranged. This is a task of grim necessity. A few men take up shovels. They look for a patch of ground that is soft enough to dig. The treeless plains offer little choice. They dig a grave, but it's not the deep, respectful 6-foot plot you might imagine. The ground is hard, and they are exhausted. The grave is shallow, barely 3 or 4 feet deep. Just enough to cover the body. The deceased is prepared for burial. There is no coffin. Wood is far too precious a resource to be used for the dead. The body is simply wrapped in their own bedding, a quilt or a blanket becoming their final shroud. A short, simple service is held. Someone who is literate might read a passage from a Bible, their voice cracking in the ceaseless wind. A prayer is said. The words feel small and inadequate against the vast, empty landscape. Family members say their goodbyes. It is a moment of raw, unvarnished grief. A wife weeping over the shrouded form of her husband. A father staring blankly at the small bundle that was his daughter. But even their grief is muted by exhaustion and the pressing need to move on. They cannot linger. The body is lowered into the shallow grave. The men begin to shovel the dirt back in. The sound of the clumps of earth hitting the wrapped body is a dull, final thud. They pile rocks on top of the grave, creating a small cairn. This is not for memorial purposes. It's to keep the wolves and coyotes from digging up the body. It is a final, desperate act of protection in a land that offers none. And here's a particularly grim detail of trail life after the grave is filled and marked. The wagon train would often deliberately drive their wagons and livestock directly over it. This seems horrifically disrespectful, but it had a cold, practical purpose. It was to obscure the location of the grave, to trample it into the surrounding landscape. Why? To hide it from scavenging animals, but also, some accounts say, to hide it from grave-robbing natives who might be looking for trinkets or clothing. The historical accuracy of this specific motive is debated, but the practice of camouflaging graves is well documented. It was a final, brutal erasure of a person's existence, done in the name of necessity. The service is over. The wagon master gives the order to move out. The train slowly gets back into motion. Family members take one last look back at the small, insignificant pile of rocks on the vast plain, a landmark that will be gone by the next season, swallowed by the grass. They have to get back in their wagon and keep walking. Their grief is now another heavy item they must carry, packed away with their dwindling supplies. You walk past the grave. You see other, older ones along the trail. A simple weathered wooden cross. A pile of stones. Sometimes just a decaying headboard with a name carved into it, the letters slowly being erased by the wind and rain. The Oregon Rail is famously described as being littered with discarded possessions, rocking chairs, dressers, pianos that people had to jettison to lighten their wagons. But it was also littered with people. The trail is a 2,000-mile-long graveyard. Some historians estimate that there was, on average, one grave for every 100 yards of the trail. The number is staggering and hard to verify, a point of ongoing scholarly discussion, but it paints a terrifying picture. The death changes something in the group. The thin veneer of hope has been scraped away completely. Before, you were pioneers on an adventure. Now you are survivors, and you know with a cold, hard certainty that not all of you will make it to the end. The question is no longer if someone else will die. The question is who will be next. The external threats, disease, weather, starvation are relentless, but as the weeks turn into months, you become acutely aware of a new danger, one that is walking right beside you. The same people you started this journey with, your fellow pioneers, are becoming just as hazardous as the landscape itself. The dream of a cooperative community, moving west together, is dissolving into a tense, distrustful society of individuals. It starts with small things, a dispute over grazing rights for the oxen. Someone's cattle wander into another family's area, and suddenly there are angry words exchanged, accusations of carelessness. A piece of equipment goes missing, a length of rope, a hammer. Was it lost all, and suspicion begins to fester in the close, cramped quarters of the wagon circle. The man who seemed like a friendly, helpful neighbor back in Missouri now looks at you with a cold, appraising stare. You start counting your sacks of flour at night. Then you have the grifters and the opportunists. Not everyone heading west is a hopeful farmer. Many are fleeing debt, the law, or a bad reputation. They see the wagon train not as a community, but as a collection of potential marks. You might encounter the patent medicine salesman, even out here. He'll wander into camp with a carpet bag full of miracle elixirs. He'll sell you a bottle of Dr. Goodfellow's Prairie Tonic, guaranteed to cure everything from dysentery to snakebite to a broken axle. It's mostly alcohol and molasses, but when you're desperate, you're willing to believe in miracles. Worse are the confidence men who prey on your ignorance of the trail ahead. A man might ride up to your train, claiming to be a scout who knows a shortcut that will save you weeks of travel. He'll demand a hefty fee from the whole train for his services. The wagon master who is cautious might advise against it, but your group is tired. The promise of saving time is intoxicating. You take a vote. The scout wins. He leads you off the main trail and into a waterless desert or an impassable canyon. And then, one night, he and your money disappear, leaving you stranded and in a far worse position than before. These shortcut disasters are a recurring theme in pioneer diaries, a testament to the lethality of wishful thinking. One of the strangest and most debated forms of trail fraud involved land. You're traveling to Oregon or California for free land, but there are hustlers who will try to sell you some of it before you even get there. A man with a stack of impressive-looking documents might convince you that he is an agent for a new township called Paradise Valley or Eden's Gate. He'll show you a beautifully drawn map of the town, complete with a church, a school, and neat little plots of land. He'll sell you a prime plot for a discounted, pre-developmented price. The town, of course, does not exist. The map is a work of fiction. Historians still puzzle over the psychology of this. Why would someone buy land they've never seen, in a place they haven't reached its peaks, to the incredible power of the dream, and the desperation to believe that a perfect, orderly future is waiting for you. And then there's the simple, ugly breakdown of social norms. The strain of the journey erodes common decency. Fights break out over trivial matters. A perceived insult can escalate into a brawl with fists and knives. The traditional structures of authority are weak out here. The wagon master has some control, but he not a lawman. His authority rests on the consensus of the group, and that consensus is starting to fray. You also have to contend with the professional traders and merchants who set up shop at key points along the trail, like Fort Laramie. These are not the friendly general store owners from back home. They are hardened monopolists. They know you are desperate. They know your supplies are low and your equipment is broken. The prices are criminal. A bag of flour that cost you $1 in Independence might cost you $20 here. You have no choice but to pay. They call it seeing the elephant, a 19th century phrase for encountering a harsh, overwhelming reality that shatters your illusions. At Fort Laramie, you see the elephant, and it's picking your pocket. You learn a hard lesson. The wilderness you feared is not just the landscape of rocks and rivers. It's also a wilderness of human nature, stripped of the comforting restraints of civilization. Your greatest asset on this journey is your own vigilance. You trust no one completely. You watch your supplies, you watch your back, and you watch the friendly stranger with the easy smile most of all. Because out here, a helping hand can just as easily be a hand reaching for your wallet or your life. The landscape is changing. The endless, rolling sea of grass is giving way to more rugged terrain, broken by mesas and strange rock formations. And with this change in scenery comes a new source of anxiety, one that has been simmering in the back of your mind since the day you left. You've been warned about it in countless pamphlets and tavern tales. Today you're going to see it for yourself. Your perception of Native Americans has been entirely shaped by rumor and sensationalist fiction. In your mind, they are one of two things: either the noble savage, or romantic and primitive child of nature, or more likely, the bloodthirsty savage, a demonic, whooping figure with a tomahawk, intent on murder and destruction. The reality you are about to encounter is far more complex and far less dramatic. One afternoon you see them. A small group of horsemen on a distant ridge. They are not charging. They are simply sitting on their horses, watching your slow, creaking wagon train. A wave of fear ripples through your group. The men grab their rifles. The women pull their children into the wagons. The train halts, a tense, silent standoff. These are likely Pawnee or Sioux or Cheyenne. They have been watching you for days. They've seen your pitiful progress, your sick animals, your exhaustion. They are not seeing a powerful invading army. They are seeing a slow-moving, poorly managed disaster, and they are trying to figure out what to do with you. Their first interaction with your wagon train is unlikely to be a violent attack. It's far more likely to be about trade. They will ride slowly into your camp, not with war cries, but with hands raised in a universal sign of peace. They have things you need: fresh meat, maybe some edible roots they've gathered, or expertly crafted moccasins that are far superior to your worn-out leather boots. And you have things they want: sugar, coffee, tobacco, metal tools, and brightly colored cloth. This interaction is fraught with tension and misunderstanding. You don't speak their language. They don't speak yours. Communication is a clumsy pantomime of gestures and pointing. They might seem aggressive in their bartering, which you interpret as a threat. They might laugh among themselves, and you, paranoid and fearful, assume they are mocking your weakness and plotting your demise. In reality, they are probably just remarking on the absurdity of your giant, clumsy wagons or your sunburnt faces. And here's a quirky bit of historical detail: one of the most sought-after items for trade was whiskey. Many pioneers carried it for medicinal purposes, and some tribes had, unfortunately, developed a taste for it. However, the whiskey that was a vile concoction known as firewater. Unscrupulous traders would take a barrel of whiskey, dilute it heavily with river water often contaminated, and then add things like tobacco spit, red pepper, and even strychnine to give it a kick. It was a poisonous, addictive substance that had a devastating effect on native communities. The ethics and consequences of this trade are a dark chapter in the history of westward expansion. While large-scale, Hollywood-style attacks on wagon trains were relatively rare, especially in the early years of the trail, violence did happen. But it often wasn't the unprovoked slaughter you imagine. Historians are still untangling the complex causes, but conflicts often arose from misunderstandings or from the pioneers' own actions. A settler might shoot a buffalo from a herd the tribe considered their own, leading to retaliation. Or young, hot-headed warriors from a tribe, acting against the orders of their elders, might try to steal horses or prove their bravery. The pioneers, in their fear, often overreacted, shooting at any native who came near, turning a potential trading opportunity into a deadly skirmish. The greatest threat the pioneers posed to the Native Americans wasn't their guns, it was their sheer numbers and the ecological devastation they brought with them. Your wagon train is one of dozens this season. You are carving deep, permanent ruts into the landscape. Your oxen are consuming tons of grass, depleting the grazing lands that the native people's horses and the buffalo herds depend on. You are scaring away the game. And you are bringing diseases, like cholera and smallpox, to which they have no immunity. You are, without even intending to, destroying their entire way of life, one 15-mile day at a time. They are watching you not just as an intrusion, but as a slow-motion apocalypse. The trading is over. You've exchanged a bag of sugar for some dried jerky and a pair of moccasins. The warriors ride away, disappearing back into the vast landscape. You breathe a sigh of relief. But the encounter has left you unsettled. They weren't the monsters from your nightmares. They were just people whose land you are crossing, whose resources you are consuming, and whose future you are unknowingly erasing. The simplistic story of good versus evil you had in your head has just been complicated, and you have the uneasy feeling that in the story, you might not be the hero. You have crossed the Great Plains. The sea of grass is behind you, but now you face a new, more intimidating obstacle: the mountains. The Rockies, or later, the Sierra Nevada. They loom in the distance, a jagged, saw-toothed barrier between you and your destination. Getting your clumsy, overloaded wagon through them will be the most physically demanding and heartbreaking part of the entire journey. The gentle 2-mile-per-hour stroll is over. The trail becomes a steep, rocky, punishing incline. The path, if you can call it that, is barely wide enough for a single wagon. On one side is a sheer rock wall, on the other, a terrifying drop into a canyon below. Your oxen, already weakened from months on the trail, strain against their yokes. Their hooves, unshod and soft, are cut and bruised by the sharp rocks. Your wagon, which felt so sturdy on the flatlands, now feels like a suicidal contraption. Its high center of gravity makes it terrifyingly unstable. Every lurch and tilt threatens to send it, and all your worldly possessions, tumbling into the abyss. You are no longer walking beside the wagon. You are pushing it. You are pushing it. You and every able-bodied man, woman, and older child are putting your shoulders to the back of the wagon, straining every muscle to help the exhausted animals move it another few feet up the incline. The wagon is too heavy. You knew this was coming. The wagon master announces what everyone has been dreading. It's time to lighten the load. Drastically. This is the moment of the great abandonment. You must now make a series of brutal, soul-crushing decisions about what you can live without. You are forced to trade your life, to put a value on your memories. You start with the practical but heavy items. The spare anvil you've been hauling for 1,000 miles, it has to go. The large cast iron stove that was supposed to be the centerpiece of your new kitchen over the side. Sacks of beans, books, extra tools, anything with weight is scrutinized. Then comes the truly painful part. You have to get rid of the things that connect you to your past, the things that have given you comfort on this miserable journey. You open the small trunk that holds your personal treasures. That heavy oak rocking chair, the one your grandfather made, the one you dreamed of sitting in on the porch of your new home, it's the first to go. You heave it to the edge of the trail and watch it tumble down the mountainside, shattering on the rocks below. Each crash is like a physical blow. The family Bible, with its generations of names in the flyleaf, it's too heavy. You rip out the pages with the family tree and leave the rest behind. The porcelain teapot your mother gave you as a wedding present is a ridiculous, fragile burden. You place it carefully on a rock, a strange, delicate offering to the harsh wilderness. The trails through the mountains became famous for being littered with these discarded items. Diaries from the period are full of heartbreaking descriptions of the scene. It was a bizarre, open-air museum of abandoned dreams. Piles of books, their pages fluttering in the wind. A child's cradle. A grandfather clock. A small, elegant writing desk, and most famously pianos. The story of pioneers hauling pianos only to the Rockies only to abandon them is a powerful symbol of the clash between aspiration and reality. Historians still debate how common this actually was. A piano is an exceptionally difficult thing to transport, but enough accounts exist to confirm that it did happen. It represents the ultimate sacrifice of culture for the sake of survival. This act of jettisoning your possessions is more than just a practical necessity. It's a psychological stripping away. Each item you discard is a piece of your old identity. You are no longer the person who owned a fine clock or a collection of leather-bound books. You are becoming someone harder, more pragmatic, more ruthless. You are being reforged in the crucible of the mountains. The descent on the other side is just as terrifying. You have to lock the wheels of the wagon with chains, turning it into a giant, uncontrollable sled. You attach ropes to the back and try to act as a human anchor, digging your heels in, trying to prevent it from careening down the slope and smashing into the rocks below. Sometimes you have to dismantle the wagon entirely, lowering it piece by piece down a particularly steep cliff face and reassembling it at the bottom. You finally reach a valley on the other side. Your wagon is lighter, but your heart is heavier. You are surrounded by the possessions of those who came before you. A ghost auction of broken dreams. You have survived the mountain pass, but you have left a part of yourself back there, shattered on the rocks along with your grandfather's chair. You've conquered the mountains, or at least survived them. You've endured disease, starvation, and the constant threat of disaster. But now, as you enter the vast, arid basins between the Rockies and the Sierra Nevada, a new and more insidious enemy begins to creep in. It doesn't attack your body, it attacks your mind. The pioneers had a name for it: prairie madness. The landscape is the main culprit. It is vast, empty, and crushingly monotonous. For weeks on end, you see nothing but sagebrush, cracked earth, and a hazy, distant horizon that never seems to get any closer. The sky is a vast, empty bowl. The silence is profound, broken only by the ceaseless, maddening wind and the creak of your wagon. It's a sensory deprivation chamber the size of a state. Your mind, starved of stimulus, begins to play tricks on you. You start to see things. A shimmering lake on the horizon that turns out to be a mirage. Strange, distorted figures in the heat haze. The familiar faces of your traveling companions strange. Paranoia begins to set in. You become convinced that people are whispering about you, plotting against you. The minor annoyances of communal travel, someone snoring, the way a person chews their food, become magnified into unbearable provocations. You are also dealing with profound isolation. Even though you are part of a wagon train, you feel utterly alone. The conversations have dried up. Everyone is locked in their own private struggle, too exhausted and preoccupied for meaningful connection. You miss your home, your friends, the simple, familiar routines of your old life with an ache that is physical. A deep, soul-crushing homesickness settles over you. This psychological strain manifested in different ways. Some people simply fell into a deep, silent depression. They would stop talking, stop eating. They would walk beside the wagon like ghosts, their eyes vacant and staring. They had given up. Their spirit had broken, and their body would soon follow. For others, the madness took a more violent form. Sudden, inexplicable fits of rage. A man might, for no apparent reason, start savagely beating one of his oxen. Or a long simmering argument between two pioneers would explode into deadly violence over a perceived slight. Diaries from the period contain chillingly brief entries about these incidents. John P. Shot and killed William S. Today. Argument over a stray mule. The line between civilization and savagery was becoming terrifyingly thin. One of the most peculiar and debated aspects of this phenomenon is its supposed effect on women. The popular narrative of the time, and for many years after, was that women were particularly susceptible to prairie madness. The isolation, the loss of their homes and social networks, the sheer, grinding hardship of their work, and the constant fear for their children's safety was said to drive many of them insane. Stories abound of women who would simply walk out into the prairie and never return, or who would be found singing to imaginary children, their minds snapped by the immense pressure. However, modern historians are reevaluating this. Is it true that women were more prone to mental breakdown, or is it that a woman expressing despair, anger, or non-compliance was more likely to be labeled mad by the men around her? A man having a violent outburst might be seen as just letting off steam, while a woman doing the same would be considered hysterical and irrational. It's a fascinating, and still unresolved, debate about gender roles and the interpretation of historical mental health. The mad woman of the plains might be as much a myth created by a patriarchal society as a genuine medical phenomenon. You feel the madness creeping at the edges of your own sanity. You find yourself talking to yourself, having long, detailed conversations with people who are 1,000 miles away. You become obsessed with trivial things, the precise way your belongings are arranged in the wagon, a particular crack in the dried earth. You are losing your grip. You try to fight it. You fight to fight it. You focus on the small, tangible tasks. Greasing the axles. Mending a tear in your shirt. Choking down your dinner. You try to anchor yourself in the physical world to stop your mind from floating away into the terrifying emptiness. You are no longer just fighting for your physical survival. You are fighting for your sanity. And in this vast, silent, empty land, it's not clear which battle is harder to win. The West promised to be a place to find yourself, but right now, you are terrified you are going to lose yourself completely. After months of endless travel, after crossing plains, rivers, and mountains, you finally hear the words you've been dreaming of. We're here. You crest a final, dusty ridge, and you see it below you, a town. Your destination. Maybe it's a dusty settlement in California's gold country, or a fledgling community in Oregon's Willamette Valley. A wave of indescribable relief washes over you. You've made it. You survived. But as you guide your battered wagon down into the valley, your relief gives way to a creeping sense of anticlimax, and then dismay. The place you have sacrificed everything for, the place you imagined as a clean, orderly paradise, is this. Town is a generous word for it. What you see is a chaotic, haphazard collection of structures that barely qualify as buildings. It's a jumble of rough-hewn log cabins, crude tents made of sailcloth, and most commonly, sod houses. There are no neat streets, no town square, no church steeple rising gracefully into the air. There is just mud, dust, and disorder. It's less of a town and more of a wound in the landscape, a raw, ugly scar of human settlement. You navigate your wagon through what passes for the main thoroughfare. It's a sea of mud, littered with garbage, animal waste, and the occasional passed-out drunk. The air, which you dreamed would be fresh and clean, is thick with the smell of wood smoke, frying bacon, and unwashed humanity. It smells depressingly similar to the jumping-off points you left behind what feels like a lifetime ago. The people don't look like the smiling, prosperous folks from the posters. They are gaunt, weathered, and have the same haunted, exhausted look in their eyes that you see in the faces of your own traveling companions. Their clothes are patched and filthy. This isn't the finish line, it's just a different kind of starting line, and it's just as hard. You set about finding your plot of land. If you're lucky, you have a legitimate claim that you filed for. More likely, you have to find an unclaimed piece of ground and squat on it, hoping to make it official later. The freeland isn't quite as free as advertised. There are filing fees, surveying costs, and endless bureaucratic hurdles, and you quickly discover that the best land, the parcels near the river with fertile soil, was already claimed years ago by the very first arrivals or by wealthy speculators. You are left with the marginal stuff, the rocky hillside, the swampy bottomland. Now you have to build a home, and you have to do it before winter sets in. You look around. There are no lumberyards. If you're in a forested area like Oregon, you have the monumental task of felling massive trees with nothing but an axe and a handsaw, then shaping them into a crude log cabin. It's backbreaking, dangerous work. If you're on the plains in places like Nebraska or Kansas, you have a different problem. There are no trees at all. So you build your first home out of the only resource available, the ground itself. You build a soddy. You use a special plow to cut the thick prairie sod, matted with generations of grass roots, into large, heavy bricks. You then stack these earthy bricks to build your walls. The roof is made of poles covered with brush, and then more sod, grass side down. This sod house is your new home. It is dark, damp, and smells perpetually of earth. In the spring, the roof leaks, dripping muddy water onto your bed and your food. In the summer, snakes, mice, and insects take up residence in the thick dirt walls. It's not uncommon to be lying in bed and have a snake plop down onto you from the ceiling. A weirdly specific but common complaint in pioneer diaries was about the constant shower of fine earth and dust that fell from the ceiling, contaminating every meal. Some women took to cooking with an umbrella held over the stove. Historians often debate the psychological impact of these early living conditions. Was the sod house a symbol of incredible human resilience and ingenuity, a testament to making a home out of nothing, or was it a deeply demoralizing hovel that crushed the spirits of those who lived within its dark, earthy walls, particularly the women who were tasked with maintaining a semblance of cleanliness and civilization inside them? The answer, as always, is probably both. You stand in front of your half-finished, dirt brick house on your rocky patch of land, looking out over the muddy, chaotic mess of the town. The grand, romantic dream of the West has evaporated completely, replaced by a cold, harsh, and dirty reality. There is no glorious sunset. There is just the back-breaking work of tomorrow, and the day after that. You have arrived. You've built your crude shelter and claimed your patch of dirt. The immediate, life-or-death struggle of the trail is over, but it's been replaced by a new kind of challenge, the crushing loneliness and isolation of frontier life. You crave connection, a sense of community, a place to escape the four dirt walls of your soddy. And in a town with no church, no library, and no theater, there is only one social institution that rises to meet that need: the saloon. You push open the swinging doors for the first time. Don't picture the grand, two-story saloons from the movies, with the ornate bar, the sparkling mirrors, and the beautiful piano player. The first saloon in a new town is usually a miserable, squalid affair. It might be a large tent or a hastily constructed wooden shack with a dirt floor. The bar is a plank of wood laid across two barrels. The air is thick with smoke, the smell of stale beer, and desperation. The patrons are a cross-section of frontier society. You see grizzled prospectors, their faces caked with dust, staring into their glasses with a mixture of hope and despair. You see cowboys, young and loud, just in from a long cattle drive and looking to spend their meager wages on a few hours of oblivion. You see teamsters, gamblers, and a few sullen-looking men who you suspect are probably on the run from something. It is not a welcoming, friendly place. It's a room full of lonely, heavily armed men. You walk up to the bar and order a whiskey. The bartender, a man with a seen-it-all expression and a dirty apron, slams a thick, greasy glass down in front of you. He pours a shot from an unlabeled bottle. You take a sip. It's horrifying. This is not the aged, smooth liquor you might have had back east. This is rot gut. It's rot cheap and brutally potent. It tastes like fire and regret. To make their supply last longer and their profits higher, bartenders would dilute their whiskey with anything they could get their hands on. River water was a common additive. But to give the watered-down product a deceptive kick, they would add things like tobacco juice for color, molasses for sweetness, and even cayenne pepper or strychnine for a bit of a bite. This concoction was famously called tarantula juice or cough in varnish. It was designed to get you drunk fast and cheap, and it did a remarkable job of it, often with debilitating side effects. The quality of the whiskey was so notoriously bad that it became a running joke. One popular saying was that frontier whiskey would make a rabbit spit in a bulldog's eye. You look around the room. There is no lively conversation. Men drink silently, purposefully. The primary purpose of the saloon is not socializing, it's anesthesia. It's a place to numb the pain, the loneliness, the disappointment of a dream that hasn't panned out. The only sounds are the clinking of glasses, the low murmur of a card game in the corner, and the occasional, sudden outburst of violence. Fights are common and can erupt over anything: a disputed card game, a spilled drink, an imagined insult. These are not the stylized, chair-smashing brawls of Hollywood. They are ugly, brutal, and often deadly. A fistfight can quickly escalate to knives or guns. The man standing next to you could be dead on the floor in a matter of seconds. There is no law to speak of, so the only rule is to mind your own business and stay out of the way. One of the more peculiar debates among historians of the West concerns the saloon's swinging doors. Why that specific design? The practical explanation is ventilation. Is ventilation. They allowed air to circulate in a smoky room while still providing a visual barrier. A more sociological theory suggests they served a psychological purpose. They allowed a man to enter or leave without the definitive, noisy commitment of opening and closing a real door. They also allowed the sounds and smells of the saloon to spill out onto the street, advertising its existence, while keeping the specific activities just out of clear view from respectable passers-by. It was a perfect architectural symbol of the saloon's place in society, half public, half private, and open to all kinds of trouble. You finish your glass of tarantula juice. It burns all the way down. You feel a dull warmth spread through you, a temporary reprieve from the cold reality of your life. But you also feel the tension in the room, the simmering aggression. This is not a place of comfort. It's a place of risk. You've come here seeking community, but all you've found is a more concentrated form of the same loneliness and danger that permeates every other aspect of your new life. Nod to the bartender and walk back out into the muddy street, feeling no less alone than when you went in. The fight in the saloon last night ended badly. One of the young cowboys, drunk and hot-headed, pulled a knife. The old prospector he was arguing with pulled a pistol. Now the cowboy is dead, lying on a wooden plank in the back of the blacksmith shop, and the town has a problem. What do you do with the prospector? There is no sheriff, no judge, no courthouse, no judge, no courthouse, no jail. But there is a powerful and terrifying force that is about to fill that vacuum: the Vigilance Committee. Suddenly a group of men appears. They are the town's leading citizens, the saloon owner, the blacksmith, a few of the more established ranchers. They are grim-faced and determined. They are not waiting for official justice, they are the justice. They march to the prospector's small shack, kick in the door, and drag him out. He doesn't resist. He knows what's coming. They don't take him to a jail. They take him to the largest tree in the center of town. A crowd gathers. You are part of that crowd, watching with a mixture of fear and fascination. There is no trial in the way you would understand it. It's more of a public hearing or a formal accusation. One of the committee leaders stands on a crate and lists the man's crimes. He shot an unarmed man. Someone yells from the crowd, "Facts are flexible." The prospector is given a chance to speak. He tries to explain what happened, his voice trembling. He says it was self-defense. But the crowd is not in a listening mood. They want a resolution. They want to feel like order is being restored, even if it's through the most disorderly means possible. The word guilty ripples through the mob. The decision has been made. This is frontier justice. It is swift, efficient, and utterly devoid of due process. These vigilance committees, or vigilantes, saw themselves as a necessary evil, a temporary measure to bring order to lawless places. They believed they were acting on behalf of the community, protecting it from thieves, claim jumpers, and murderers, and sometimes they did just that. They would run horse thieves out of town or deal with genuinely dangerous criminals. But this system was also incredibly dangerous and prone to abuse. A vigilance committee could easily become a tool for settling personal scores. If you had a dispute with a neighbor overall and claim, you could accuse him of being a cattle rustler, whip up the committee, and have your problem solved by a rope. It was a system that ran on rumor, prejudice, and mob rule. One of the strangest and most debated aspects of vigilante justice is the level of ritual involved. They often weren't just simple, angry lynchings. The committees in places like Montana and San Francisco were highly organized. They had constitutions, secret handshakes, and warning signs. A common practice was to leave a note or a symbol on the targeted person's door. In Montana, it was often a drawing of a skull and crossbones with the numbers 3,777. The meaning of these numbers is lost to history and is a source of endless, passionate debate among historians. Does it refer to the dimensions of a grave 3 feet by 77 inches? Is it a reference to a Masonic ritual? Was it the number on a vigilante's badge? No one knows for sure. But it was a terrifyingly effective warning: get out of town, or else. Back at the tree, the sentence is being carried out. Someone throws a rope over a sturdy branch. The blacksmith, an expert with knots, fashions a hangman's noose. They place it around the prospector's neck. He is weeping now, begging for his life. He is stood up on the back of a horse. The leader of the committee gives a short speech about the importance of law and order. Then, he slaps the horse on the rump. The horse bolts. The rope snaps taut. The man's body jerks, convulses, and then hangs limp, swaying slightly in the breeze. The crowd is silent for a moment, and then slowly people begin to disperse, heading back to their homes or to the saloon. Order has been restored. You walk away, a cold sickness in the pit of your stomach. You have just witnessed a communal murder. Was it justice, or was it just a lynching? You saw a man killed without a trial, without a defense, based on the anger of a mob. You are starting to understand that in the West, law and order is not a set of rules written in a book. It's a fluid, terrifying concept that can be defined by whoever has the most power, the most guns, and the longest rope. Ever find yourself on the wrong side of that definition? Now that you're resettled, or at least have a dirt roof over your head, you need to find a way to make a living. The dream of being a gentleman farmer with fields of golden wheat is proving difficult on your rocky, arid plot of land. You look around for other opportunities. And then you see them, the cowboys. They ride into town with a jingle of spurs and a cloud of dust, full of swagger and cash from a recent cattle sale. To you, an exhausted, dirt-poor farmer, their life looks appealing. It seems free, adventurous, and romantic. It's the quintessential image of the American West. You think to yourself, maybe I could do that. You are deeply, profoundly wrong. The reality of being a cowboy is one of the most misunderstood and overly romanticized jobs in American history. It was not a life of heroic adventure. It was a life of grueling, low-paying, migratory farm labor on horseback. Let's say you get hired on for a cattle drive. First, forget the fancy gear you see in the movies. You probably don't turn a custom-saddled horse into a pearl-handled revolver. You're a greenhorn. You'll be given the worst horse in the string, a cantankerous animal, named something like Widowmaker. Your saddle will be old and worn, and it will chafe you raw in places you'd rather not discuss. Your job on the cattle drive is not to ride majestically at the head of the herd. Your job is to ride drag. This is the worst position on the drive. You ride at the very back of a herd of 1,000+ cattle. For 10 to 12 hours a day, you are enveloped in a permanent, suffocating cloud of dust kicked up by the herd. You can't see. You can barely breathe. At the end of the day, you look like a statue made of dirt. Your job is to beeve along the weakest, sickest, and slowest cattle, the ones that are constantly trying to drop out of the herd. It's tedious, frustrating, and filthy work. The diet is as monotonous as it was on the trail, if not worse. The trail boss hires a cook who drives the chuck wagon. This cook is a critically important figure, and often the crankiest man on the drive. He serves 3 things: beef, beans, and biscuits. You might get some steak from a freshly slaughtered cow, but it's often tough and cooked over an open fire. The rest of the time, it's the familiar, greasy trinity. And coffee. Endless amounts of black, bitter, gritty coffee, boiled in a pot over the fire. The work is dangerous. A stampede is the most feared event. A lightning strike, a sudden noise, or sometimes nothing at all could spook the herd, and suddenly you have 1,000 tons of beef and horns thundering across the prairie. Your job is to ride alongside the stampeding herd, trying to turn them and get them to run in a circle until they tire themselves out. Many cowboys were trampled to death in stampedes. You could also be killed by a fall from your horse, by crossing a swollen river, or by getting caught in a sudden blizzard. And the pay, it was terrible. A typical cowboy earned about $25 a month. From this, you had to pay for your own clothes, your tobacco, and any other personal items. When you finally got to a cattle town like Dodge City or Abilene at the end of the drive, you might have a few $100s in your pocket. Most cowboys, starved for entertainment and relief after months on the trail, would blow their entire stake in a few days on whiskey, gambling, and brothels, ending up broke and having to sign on for another drive. It was a cycle of hard labor and fleeting, expensive pleasure. One of the more interesting and often overlooked facts about cowboys is their diversity. The classic image is a white, Anglo-Saxon man, but historians estimate that as many as 1 in 4 cowboys was African American. Many were former slaves who had incredible skills with horses and cattle. A significant number were also Hispanic vaqueros, from whom the American cowboy tradition is largely derived, or Native American. The trail drive was one of the few places in post-Civil War America where men of different races worked, ate, and slept together, bound by the shared hardship of the job. This integration wasn't born of progressive ideals, but of practical necessity on the trail. What mattered was the color of your skin, but how well you could handle a horse and a herd. This aspect of cowboy life is still a topic of active research and discussion, challenging the whitewashed myth. You consider all this: the dust, the terrible food, the low pay, the constant danger. You look at your small, pathetic plot of land. It's not much, but at least the ground under your feet isn't moving. At least you don't have to breathe dust for a living. The romantic image of the cowboy shatters. You realize it's just another form of backbreaking, thankless labor and that is full of it. You decide to stick with farming. It might be a slower death, but it's a cleaner one. You've decided against the cowboy life, choosing instead to focus on your farm and the slow, arduous task of building a life. As you work your land, you observe the lives of the women around you, including your own wife, and you realize they are facing a struggle that is entirely different from, and in many ways harder than, your own. The myth of the West is a male-centric one, full of cowboys, prospectors, and gunfighters. The reality for women was a story of relentless, unaccompanied labor and immense personal risk. A man's work on the frontier was physically demanding, but it was often seasonal and task-oriented. You plow the field, you build the fence, you hunt. A woman's work was a never-ending, Sisyphean cycle that started before sunrise and ended long after sunset, every single day. Her day begins in the dark, inside your damp sod house or drafty cabin. She has to start the fire, haul water from the nearest creek, which could be a mile or more away, and prepare breakfast. While you are out working the fields, she is a whirlwind of constant activity. She has to cook, bake bread, and prepare 3 meals a day from the same meager ingredients. She tends the small vegetable garden you've hopefully managed to start, which is often the only source of nutrition beyond bacon and beans. She is also your family's clothier. She doesn't just mend clothes, she often has to make them from scratch. This involves spinning wool, weaving cloth, and hand sewing every single shirt, dress, and pair of pants for the entire family. She makes soap from lye animal fat, a caustic and unpleasant process. She makes candles from tallow. She preserves food for the winter, a critical task that means the difference between survival and starvation. She is a chef, a baker, a seamstress, a doctor, a teacher to your children, and the general manager of a domestic enterprise that is constantly on the verge of collapse. And she does all of this in near total isolation, often not seeing another woman for weeks or months on end. But the most dangerous and terrifying part of a frontier woman's life was childbirth. In a world with no access to doctors, no understanding of germs, and no emergency medical care, Giving birth was a life-threatening event. When a woman went into labor, she was attended by female neighbors or family members if she was lucky enough to have any nearby. Often, she was entirely alone with only her husband to help. Complications that would be minor and easily managed today were death sentences. A breech birth, a hemorrhage, or an infection afterwards, puerperal fever, were almost always fatal. The mortality rate for both mothers and infants was appallingly high. Every pregnancy was a roll of the dice. A family cemetery on a frontier homestead often tells a tragic story, a series of tiny graves for infants who didn't survive, followed by a larger one for a young wife who died in her 20s or 30s, often during her third or fourth childbirth. This brings up a fascinating undebated topic among social historians. Did women want to be there? The decision to go west was almost always made by the husband. Letters and diaries from the period reveal a wide spectrum of female experiences. Some women embraced the adventure and the challenge, finding a sense of empowerment and capability they never would have had back east. They saw themselves as equal partners in the great enterprise of building a new life. However, many other women were reluctant, terrified pioneers. They were ripped away from their homes, their families, and their female support networks. They were thrown into a harsh, violent, unmasculine world where they were expected to recreate a domestic, civilized sphere in a dirt hovel. Their diaries are filled with passages of profound loneliness, depression, and a desperate longing for home. They write about the wind that never stops blowing, the crushing emptiness of the landscape, and the constant fear for their children's lives. A little-known aspect of this is the legal status of women. In the East, women's property rights were often severely restricted. But in the West, out of sheer necessity, things began to change. Western states and territories were among the first to grant women the right to own property independently of their husbands and, eventually, the right to vote. Wyoming granted women suffrage in 1816, a full 50 years before the 19th Amendment. Was this because Western men were enlightened feminists? Unlikely. It was more a pragmatic recognition that women were essential partners in the settlement of the West, and attracting them to the region required granting them more rights. It was also a political maneuver to boost population numbers for statehood applications. You look at your wife. You see the calluses on her hands, the permanent exhaustion in her eyes. You left your old life seeking freedom and opportunity. You wonder if she feels she has found either. Her domain may be the small dog-sawed house, but her labor is just as essential to this enterprise as your own. She is the silent, unsung hero of this story, the civilizing force in the wilderness, and she is paying an immense price for a dream that may not have even been hers to begin with. The seasons turn. You survive your first brutal winter, huddled in your soddy, and your first scorching summer. You've managed to clear a little more land, your vegetable garden is slightly larger, and you've acquired a few more chickens. Life is still incredibly hard, but a fragile sense of permanence is beginning to take root. You are no longer just a survivor, you are a settler, and you are getting intimately familiar with the strange, living entity that is your home, the sod house. Living in a house made of dirt is a unique experience. It has its advantages. The thick 2 to 3 foot wide walls provide incredible insulation. Your soddy is surprisingly cool in the blistering heat of summer and relatively warm in the freezing gales of winter. It's also fireproof, a significant advantage in a landscape prone to grass fires. And, of course, it was cheap. But the disadvantages are numerous and profoundly unpleasant. The house is alive. The sod bricks were cut with the root systems of the prairie grass intact. In the spring after the rains, your walls might actually start to sprout. Little green shoots and wildflowers might emerge from the walls of your living room. It sounds poetic, but it's a constant reminder that you are living inside a barely tamed chunk of the ecosystem. The roof, made of sod laid over a lattice of brush and poles, is your greatest foe. It is never truly waterproof. A gentle rain might not be a problem, but a real downpour is a domestic disaster. The roof becomes saturated and begins to drip. Not clean water, but a slow, steady trickle of black, muddy ooze that falls indiscriminately on your bed, your table, and into your cooking pot. The pioneers had a grim joke: the roof would leak for 3 days after the rain stopped. The house is also a bustling metropolis for every creepy crawly thing on the prairie. Mice, voles, and gophers burrow into the soft walls. Spiders, centipedes, and beetles are your constant roommates. And most in a wigwam, there are the snakes. Bull snakes and garter snakes, attracted by the warmth and the abundance of rodent prey, love to live in the thatch of the roof and cracks in the walls. The horror of a snake dropping from the ceiling onto the dinner table or into your bed is a recurring theme in pioneer memoirs. One woman famously wrote that she got used to the mice, but the snakes never. Cleanliness is a hopeless bath. No matter how often you sweep it, it's never clean. And the ceiling, as mentioned, sheds a constant, fine shower of dust and dirt onto everything below. This sifting was the bane of every homemaker's existence. It got into the food, the water, the bedding. It was a permanent layer of grit on every surface of your life. This brings us to a peculiar and much debated piece of frontier folklore: the use of whitewash. To combat the gloom and the dirt, and to create a more civilized interior, women would often plaster the inside walls with a mixture of local clay and ash, and then apply a coat of whitewash, a simple paint made from slate, lime, and water. This brightened the dark interior and helped to seal out some of the dust and bugs. Some historians see this as a heroic act of domesticity, an attempt to impose order and cleanliness on a chaotic environment. Others see it as a desperate and ultimately futile gesture against the overwhelming reality of living in a house made of earth. Was it an act of empowerment or an act of desperation? The debate reflects our own modern ideas about home, cleanliness, and the role of women. Despite all its flaws, the sod is your sanctuary. It's the place you retreat to after a day of back-breaking labor. It's the one small pocket of relative safety in a vast and dangerous world. You learn its quirks. You know which corner the mice prefer. You have developed a grudging affection for this strange, living, dirt house. It's not the neat wooden cabin from the posters, but it's your stubbornness and your will to survive. It is, for now, home. And as you sit at your rough-hewn table picking dirt out of your stew, you realize that your standards for what constitutes home have changed drastically. You've survived your first years of settlement. You have a field, a sod house, and a routine. A dangerous thought begins to creep in: maybe you've made it. Maybe the worst is over. Then, one hot, dusty afternoon in late summer, your youngest child starts to complain of a headache. By evening, she has a raging fever. Soon, she develops a rash, small, rose-colored spots on her abdomen. She becomes delirious, weak, and racked with stomach pains. You recognize the symptoms. You've heard the whispers from the next homestead over. It's sweeping through the settlement: typhoid fever. You thought you'd left the specter of epidemic disease behind you on the trail, back in the squalid jumping-off towns. You were wrong. The diseases of the frontier were not just a feature of the journey, they were a permanent resident of the destination. Your new, fledgling town is a perfect breeding ground for illness. The source of the typhoid is, once again, the water. Or rather, the lack of sanitation. Your well, which you dug with back-breaking labor, is probably too close to your latrine pit. The concept of a safe setback distance was non-existent. The bacteria Salmonella typhi, passed from the waste of an infected person, seeps through the soil and into the groundwater. It contaminates your well, your neighbor's well, the town's communal well. The very water you drink to survive is now poisoning you. Another vector is flies. In a world of outdoor latrines, wandering livestock, and no window screens, flies are everywhere. They feast on contaminated waste and then land on the food you're about to eat, mechanically transferring the bacteria. There is no doctor worthy of the name. There might be a woman in town who is skilled with herbal remedies, or a man who calls himself a doctor because he owns a dusty medical book. They are powerless against this. They might recommend bed rest and prayers. They might also recommend something harmful, like bleeding or purging, which will only weaken the patient further. You are helpless. You sit by your child's bedside, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, trying to get her to sip a little water. You watch as the disease takes its course, the fever raging for weeks. The crisis point is the third week, when intestinal hemorrhage or perforation can occur, a complication that is almost always fatal. The entire community is gripped by fear. People stop visiting each other. They eye their own wells with suspicion. The town, which was just beginning to feel like a community, is now a collection of isolated, terrified families, each trapped in their own home with the disease. This brings up one of the more heartbreaking realities of frontier medicine. Quarantine was often brutally, but necessarily enforced by the community itself. If a family was known to have typhoid, smallpox, or diphtheria, their neighbors might simply refuse to have any contact with them. In some documented cases, armed guards would be posted outside a house to ensure no one went in or out. They might leave food and water on the doorstep, but they would not offer comfort or aid. It was a cruel but rational act of self-preservation for the larger community. Historians still debate the social fabric of these events. Was it a sign of community breakdown, or a sign of a community's desperate, cold-blood instinct to survive? Beyond the big, terrifying epidemics like typhoid and cholera, there was a host of other ailments that made life a constant misery. There was the ague, which was most likely malaria, prevalent in swampy, low-lying areas. It caused recurring cycles of intense fever, chills, and sweating that could plague a person for years, leaving them permanently weakened. There were waves of diphtheria that would sweep through, choking the life out of small children. Scarlet fever, the common childhood diseases of today, were terrifying killers in a world without vaccines or antibiotics. Your child either survives or she doesn't. It's a matter of her own immune strength and pure luck. If she survives, she will be weak for months, but she will have lifelong immunity. If she dies, you will dig another grave in the small, windswept plot of land behind your house. You will carve her and aim into a wooden marker and add her to the silent, growing population of the town cemetery. You have learned the final cruel lesson of the West. There is no promised land. There is no safe harbor. You can conquer the wilderness, build a home, and plow the land, but you cannot escape the invisible enemies that travel with you. The greatest dangers you face are not the dramatic ones, but the microscopic ones. You can't shoot them, you can't arm them, and you can't run them, and you can't build a wall high enough to keep them out. They are the silent partners in the settlement of the West, and their price is paid in fresh graves. Years pass. Your town has grown. It now has a few more permanent buildings, a general store, and even a part-time sheriff. The raw, chaotic energy of the early days has settled into a more predictable, if still difficult, routine. And with this semblance of civilization, a strange nostalgia begins to set in, both in your own mind and in the popular imagination back east. People start telling stories. Stories about heroic gunslingers, noble lawmen, and the dramatic showdowns that supposedly defined your era. The most iconic of these is the High Noon Duel. You hear these stories, maybe read them in a dime novel that has made its way to the general store, and you have to chuckle. The image of two men, steely-eyed and grim-faced, facing each other on a dusty main street at an appointed time, is one of the most powerful and enduring myths of the West. The formal one-on-one gunfight, governed by an unspoken code of honor, was exceptionally rare. So rare, in fact, that you could live your entire life on the frontier and never see one. Historians have painstakingly researched this, and they've found only a handful of documented cases that even remotely resemble the Hollywood showdown. The most famous example, the duel between Wild Bill Hickok and Davis Stock in 1865, is often cited as the classic case. They did face off in a public square and shoot at each other. But this was the exception that proves the rule. It became famous precisely because it was so unusual. So if they weren't having formal duels, how did people get shot? The reality of gun violence in the West was much more like the violence you see today. It was messy, clumsy, and deeply unglamorous. It was often fueled by alcohol and happened spontaneously in crowded, chaotic places like saloons and gambling halls. Aim and didn't call another man out. He shot him in the back during a card game, or he ambushed him in a dark alley. Or two drunks would fumble for their pistols, firing wildly and hitting innocent bystanders more often than each other. The guns themselves were not the finely tuned instruments of precision you see in the movies. The iconic Colt Peacemaker was a powerful weapon, but it was not particularly accurate, especially in the hands of an amateur. Most men were not expert marksmen. Hitting a moving target under pressure was incredibly difficult. The idea of fanning the hammer, holding the trigger and rapidly slapping the hammer with your other hand was a great way to empty your gun into seconds and hit absolutely nothing you were aiming at. This brings us to a grim but statistically accurate point: you were far more likely to die from a mundane accident than from a gunfight. You had a significantly higher chance of being killed by your own horse, kicked in the head, thrown from the saddle, or dragged to death after your foot got caught in a stirrup. You could be killed by a falling tree while clearing land, by a lightning strike during a thunderstorm, or by drowning while trying to ford a river. The number one killer by a huge margin was disease. The romantic death in a blaze of glory was a statistical fantasy. The common death was in a dirty bed, shivering from a fever. So why did the myth of the duel become so powerful? This is a topic of great debate among historians and cultural critics. The dime novels of the late 19th century were a huge factor. Writers back east, like Ned Buntline, took the messy realities of the frontier and polished them into exciting, heroic narratives for a captivated audience. They created heroes out of figures like Buffalo Bill Cody and Wild Bill Hickok, exaggerating their exploits and inventing new ones. The duel was a perfect dramatic device. It was clean, honorable, and had a clear winner and loser. It transformed a grubby, drunken murder into a chivalrous contest of skill and nerve. The myth also served a deeper psychological purpose. It helped to justify the violence and chaos of westward expansion. It suggested that even in this lawless land, there was a code. It framed the violence not as ugly and criminal, but as a necessary and even noble part of taming the wilderness. It was a comforting lie that helped a nation make sense of its own often brutal history. You look at the pistol you might keep in a drawer in your soddy. You probably bought it years ago, thinking you'd need it to fight off bandits or Indians. You most likely used it to shoot a snake or a coyote, and that's about it. The great gunfight you were prepared for never happened. The real battles you fought were against the blizzards, the droughts, the fevers, and the crushing loneliness. Those were the enemies that truly defined your life in the West, and they are the ones the dime novels will never write about. Decades have passed. Your soddy has been replaced by a proper wooden farmhouse. The town has a church, a school, and a real doctor who has even been to a medical college back east. You are old now. Your body is a roadmap of a hard life. Your hands are gnarled by arthritis. Your back aches with the memory of 1,000 days of labor. One winter, you develop a deep, rattling cough that just won't go away. Your family, concerned, insists you go and see the new doctor. You are skeptical. Your past experiences with doctors have involved whiskey, sores, and questionable mercury compounds. But you relent. You sit in his small, clean office, a far cry from the dirty tents and saloons where you've seen medicine practiced before. The doctor is a young man, full of confidence and new ideas. He listens to your chest with a stethoscope, a modern marvel. He takes your temperature with a thermometer. He seems knowledgeable. He nods thoughtfully and then tells you that you have a severe case of bronchitis, maybe bordering on pneumonia. He says he has just the thing for it. He goes to his medicine cabinet and comes back with a small bottle filled with a thick, syrupy liquid. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, the label reads. He tells you it's a highly effective cough suppressant and will help you rest. Or maybe he offers you a bottle of Bayer's heroin, which was astonishingly marketed as a non-addictive cough remedy for children in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. You take the medicine home and follow the doctor's instructions. You take a spoonful of the syrup. It tastes sweet, and within half an hour, your cough does indeed subside. A wonderful, warm, dreamy feeling washes over you. You feel better than you have in months. You sleep soundly for the first time in weeks. This new medicine is a miracle. It is not a miracle. It is a narcotic. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup was a hugely popular patent medicine, and its primary, unlisted ingredient was morphine. You are essentially treating your cough with a hefty dose of an opiate. Bayer's product, as the name suggests, was literally heroin. You are not getting better, you are just getting high. This was the golden age of patent medicines and medical quackery. In a time before federal regulation, anyone could bottle a concoction, give it a fancy name, and sell it to the public with wild, unsubstantiated claims. These remedies were advertised everywhere, promising to cure everything from cancer to baldness to female complaints. And their active ingredients were often terrifying. Many contained massive amounts of alcohol. Others relied on opium, morphine, heroin, or even cocaine. Cocaine toothed drops were popular for teething babies. Vin Mariani, a medicinal wine endorsed by popes and presidents, was essentially red wine infused with cocaine. So what about that dose of calomel the trailed doctor gave you for dysentery all those years ago that was a mercury compound? You were being treated with a heavy metal poison. The prevailing theory of heroic medicine believed that the doctor's job was to actively and aggressively intervene, often by purging the body. This led to treatments that were, arguably, worse than the disease. A common prescription for a fever might be a blister, where a caustic paste was applied to the skin to create a large, painful blister with the belief that it would draw the fever and toxins out of the body. Here lies a fascinating and still debated question among medical historians. When did medicine actually start helping more than it harmed for most of human history? A patient's chances were probably better if they just stayed home and let nature take its course. Many argue that the turning point didn't come until the widespread understanding of germ theory in the late 19th century and the development of antibiotics in the 20th. Before that, a visit to the doctor was a very risky proposition. Your well-meaning new doctor, with his miracle heroin cough syrup, is a perfect example of this transitional period. He has better diagnostic tools, but his treatments can still be incredibly dangerous. You continue taking your soothing syrup. You are sleeping better, but you feel groggy and confused during the day. Your cough isn't really improving, but you don't care as much. The warm, hazy feeling is what you look forward to. You are becoming dependent on it. The medicine that was supposed to cure you is now becoming a new, insidious disease. You've survived the wilderness, the violence, and the epidemics. You may be done in by the very thing that promised to bring you comfort, a bottle of sweet, soothing, readily available poison prescribed by a man of science. The final season of your life has arrived. It's winter again. The snow has fallen, blanketing your farm in a thick, silent layer of white. The world outside your window has gone quiet. The town is a distant thought. Your world has shrunk to the four walls of your farmhouse, the warmth of the wood stove, and the faces of your children and grandchildren. The cough you tried to cure with the doctor's laudanum-laced syrup never really left. It has settled deep in your chest, a permanent resident. Your body is tired. The endless years of labor have taken their toll. Every joint aches. Walking across the room is a significant effort. Your days are spent in a rocking chair by the fire, the same chair you painstakingly rebuilt after its predecessor was thrown from the wagon in the mountains a lifetime ago. This is the final test of the frontier, and it's one that is rarely talked about in the heroic epics. It's not a dramatic battle against a blizzard or a bear. It's the slow, quiet, grinding challenge of old age and infirmity in a place built by and for the young and the strong. Your farm, which was your pride and your livelihood, is now a source of anxiety. You can no longer work it. Your children do their best, but they have their own families, their own struggles. You worry about the fences that need mending, the leaks in the barn roof. You feel like a burden, a feeling that is anathema to the fierce independence that has defined your entire life. The greatest challenge now is the isolation. In the winter, the roads can be impassable for weeks on end. Your neighbors are miles away. The world contracts. The silence of the snow-covered landscape presses in. It's a silence that is much deeper and more profound than the one you experienced on the empty plains. That was the silence of anticipation and fear. This is the silence of finality. You spend your days lost in memory. The faces of the people you lost on the trail come back to you with startling clarity. The young man with the crushed leg, the child who died of dysentery, the family whose wagon was swept away in the river. You remember their faces more clearly than you remember what you had for breakfast. The trail, which was a physical journey that ended decades ago, has become a permanent landscape in your mind. One of the less examined aspects of pioneer life is what happened at the end. What was old age like for this first generation of settlers? Did they feel a sense of triumph and accomplishment, or did they feel a sense of disappointment? They had chased a dream of a pastoral paradise and found instead a life of unceasing, brutal hardship. Did they look at the civilization they had helped to build, the towns, the farms, the churches, and think it was all worth it, or did they lie in their beds at night, haunted by the cost? Historians who study the letters and diaries of elderly pioneers find a complex mixture of both pride and deep melancholy. There are no easy answers. You look out the window at the snow. It's beautiful in a stark and forgiving way. It erases all the details of the landscape, smoothing everything into a single, white, featureless plain. It reminds you of the beginning of your journey, of the blank slate you thought you were coming to. You realize now that the West was never a blank slate. It was a place full of its own stories, its own peoples, and its own brutal rules long before you ever arrived. And it wasn't a place that conquered you. It stripped you of your illusions, your possessions, your youth, and your loved ones. It took everything you had and forged you into something new, something you never expected to be. Your breathing is shallow now. The warmth of the fire feels distant. The faces of your family blur. You are not afraid. Fear is a luxury for the living, an emotion tied to the future. And your future has dwindled to a point. Your journey is ending, here in this quiet room, a world away from where it began. The great adventure is over. You close your eyes. The silence is no longer threatening. It is peaceful. You have survived. The fire in the stove crackles softly, a steady, rhythmic pulse in the quiet room. The story is over now, but the echoes remain, hanging in the air like dust motes in a sunbeam. Your own bed feels incredibly soft, impossibly safe. The gentle hum of the fan is not the sound of a ceaseless, maddening prairie wind, but a soft, lulling white noise, a mechanical lullaby for a modern world. You feel the weight of your blanket, a gentle pressure that is nothing like the oppressive weight of a sod roof, but a simple grounding comfort. Imagine the immense, star-filled sky of the plains, a canopy of silent, cold diamonds. Not a sight seen from a moving wagon filled with fear, but a peaceful panorama viewed from a place of perfect stillness. Let the vastness of that space relax you. Feel the tension in your shoulders and your jaw release, or letting go of burdens you didn't even know you were carrying. The hardships of the trail, the dust, the hunger, the fear are just words now, fading as you drift deeper into comfort. The ghosts of the pioneers have told their tale, and now they recede back into the quiet pages of history, leaving you to the peace of your own time, your own safe place. The journey is done. Your only task now is to let the gentle current of sleep carry you away. The end of the article. Good night.